Hello, Sharon. This is the Veronica Hamilton. I created the uh, Unwritten role-playing game. I'm the primary developer, and so I thought it would be a great idea to do some walkthrough games of Myst, and just give some sort of commentary. Um, this is all very informal. This is all going to be sort of off the cuff, and I'm still trying to figure everything out from, terms of sound and format and what sort of comments and whatever. But it's all going to be um, in there somehow. And hopefully, once I have people in chat, um, then I can, interact with the chat, take questions, that sort of thing. Um, my layout's pretty simple right now. Like I said, still trying to get the hang of everything. Um, but I figured we can go ahead and uh, just go ahead and give a walkthrough of the game. I'll be playing Real Myst, um, Masterpiece Edition. I'm typing this into so it'll show up in my little text thing over here. And we will see what we can see. Okie doke. On to the game. I'm actually going to go ahead and let's start a brand new game so we can get all the cool intro and everything. I may or may not make commentary over the intro, but we'll do what we can. I probably will say that a lot. Do what we can. Here we go. A classic cyan intro. You can see Myst there. A classic, newer cyan intro. And
I realized the moment I fell into the fissure that the book would not be destroyed as I planned. It continued falling into that starry expanse of which I had only a fleeting glimpse. I've tried to speculate where it might have landed, but I must admit that such conjecture is futile. Still, questions about whose hands might one day hold my Myst book are unsettling to me. I know my apprehensions might never be allayed, and so I close, realizing that perhaps the ending has not yet been written.
So if it isn't obvious, wait, someone said that the audio is a little high. Okie doke. Thank you for pointing it out, CNC. And I will make that go down. And we'll see how it goes. By the way, hi Cincy. Nice. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me babble a little bit. If you'd like to be called something else, or if you have particular gender markers or anything that you want to use, let me know. So, obviously, Unwritten comes from that particular last line. The ending has not been written. So that's the name. That's the inspiration for the name Unwritten, and in a way, sort of the inspiration for the game in general. I just kind of wanted to make something so that people could write their own parts of the story. Because if the ending hasn't been written, then people need to write it. So we'll go with that. But here we get our classic Myst intro, Myst book, linking panel. Now, the linking panels here are all, these are quick, videos and such. In the actual lore, linking panels are actually live. You can actually see a live image of the age as it is at the moment. It seems to have they're ambiguous about whether it's a specific view, but I would have to assume that you can't like rotate it or anything like that, and there doesn't seem to be any sound that comes across. So it's just kind of, you get your own, sort of view in here. That's an important detail for some players. Hey, 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 Capel, good to hear from you. Hey, Junie, good to see you. So, no, as a matter of fact, I have played this many, many times. And Capel, I know your name because I'm one of the other people who prowl around the Myst Twitch streams a lot. Um, so I've played Myst quite a bit. Once again, I am the developer of the Unwritten role playing game, and that's what we're going to focus on. Is how playing through Myst and how we adapt it to role playing game, and also how other comments as I have them. Um, so yeah, let's what the link panel. Let's actually get link through. Hey Rachel, thank you for stopping by. I'm actually going to do free roam, and I think that's it for the moment. Okay. Once again, here it is. The classic Myst cold opening. Um, Cold opening is throwing your players into the middle of something and not knowing, with no experience. I have Capella. I have played Abduction. I've played all of the Myst games. Um, in fact, I got to play some of them as focus testers early. I have not yet played The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Maybe I will at some point on this stream, and then I can see it. You can see it first time, as well as me making commentary about how I would adapt things. But yeah, here we are, um, working through the basics of the game. I'm gonna go through. We're gonna find all the marker switches and turn them on, just so we can have that done. But this sort of cold open, in the sense of players just being dumped somewhere where they don't know anything, is really a great way to start any session or any sort of game. Um, the difference between what we see here and what you would see in an unwritten game is that um, the stranger is intentionally ambiguous in Myst. It's supposed to be you, um, and you have no attributes. Um, Unwritten, of course, you will have your characters. Um, they'll have histories. They'll have attributes. They'll have aspects and skills and all of that. So, and then you'll be probably more than one player, so that you'll be a lot less. There'll be a lot less of that sort of solitary feeling that you get from coming around Myst. Um, However, a really cool idea would be for an unwritten game is to start an unwritten game with a blank character sheet. And might be able to just choose a name and maybe a high concept, or maybe not. But just start, all the characters start with a blank sheet and a name, and you start playing. Um, what you can do is then you begin to fill things out over time. As your characters are exploring and interacting with the environment, you can choose to say, okay, you need to do this. You need to do X. Um, so you need to do X. What do you think your character might know about that? And you can fill in things like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if my character already knew how to do that, or and then you can fill in an aspect, assign a skill, all those sorts of things. So I mean, that will usually take a very good particular set of players and GM to do it that way, but you know, it might be interesting. From what I've seen in people's playthroughs, people miss this little side thing here all the time because they go off here and they start exploring and that sort of thing. But um, you go, but we're gonna go in here. We're gonna check it. Obviously, the message hasn't been set up yet, but little things, little devices, and things that you can just kind of play with um, is a good thing for your characters, even if they don't particularly matter. Um, you don't want to let your characters spend a lot of time like futzing with things. But you have to balance that out with, maybe your players like futzing with things. Maybe they just like doing it. Um, so you kind of give them some time to enjoy themselves that may not be necessarily story based. It may not be advancing the plot very much, but you still want to do it. Okay, make the extrusion tests. I'm actually not going to put it in quite yet because I'm kind of trying to follow some of the sort of logical progression first, but here we go. I like running unwritten games with a lot of environmental exploration, partially because that's what Myst is you're sort of in an environment and you're exploring it. Um, I'm also not very good at making character voices, like NPCs. Some people have the whole dialect thing down and they can do all different sorts of voices. I am not one of them. So I kind of I will often um, rely on the environment to tell my story as opposed and not have as many NPCs. Um, that does make a pretty good Myst-like feel, I think. The biggest problem being that if you don't have players that are proactive, who are willing to kind of go, oh, let's go do something, it can get slow really quickly. But it's just something to be aware of. Of course, I want to stop here and pay respects to Tiana. Actually, I think it's appropriately pronounced Tiana. The apostrophe is a glottal stop in that particular place, and that's of course Atris's grandmother Anna from the book of Tiana. Um, People who don't know the game very much, when they find this, they're very sort of confused. They think it's a code for something because obviously it's got to be you know, but it does make sense in the larger context. Um, that's something things that you can use too. Is that you can drop hints that make sense in the larger context, um, but you don't have to explain it right away. And you know sometimes your players will realize later on. They'll go, wait, there was that thing there, and now that's the same person. And sometimes they won't, but it's all sort of about presenting texture. Catherine, my love, I've left you a message of the utmost importance in the forechamber besides the dock. Enter the number of marker switches on the island into the imager and retrieve the message. Yours, Atris. So this is when you start going around and counting the marker switches. A lot of places, people, it takes a while for people to figure out that's what these are marker switches. Um, so I'm going to make a hot take here in that Unwritten, as a role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game, is not necessarily a good place for puzzles, which may seem apocryphal to a game based off a game of puzzles. But I think that players are it's the game. Tabletop role-playing game is a different experience, I think, than a video game. Um, and you know, you can sit. I can play Myst and fiddle with things for hours and be interested. Um, but it's much harder for a group of players to do that. Because usually there's one or two players who are really into it, and the other players are like, I don't know. Um, someone takes the lead and they take over and that sort of thing. So I prefer to run games with problem solving situations rather than actual puzzles. Um, and I think that Myst as a game is probably a good example of where to find that, in some places, where to find that balance. Um, how many marker switches um, are on the island is not a good puzzle for a role playing game. Um, because it's kind of boring. It's like, okay, well, I go look by the library. Well, there's a marker switch there. Okay. I go look, by these trees. Well, there's no marker switch there. See, kind of boring. Um, but the idea that, a note that says, hey, there's a number of, marker switches on the island, and then you take that to the messenger. Then the players can go, oh, well, how many are there in the island? Well, there are 8. You've seen 8. Okay, let's go try 8. Um, the key thing, I think, is not doing whatever it takes to not stop the flow of play. Does that make sense? And by the way, if I'm talking too much, let me know. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure it out. And if you have questions, please give them. Otherwise, I will talk your ears off. Oh, thank you, Jared. See, now you're just encouraging me. But I like being encouraged, so there we go. But, so yeah, I mean, that could take you a while to figure out as a player of Myst. Oh, that's what a marker switch is. Oh, okay, I hope I missed a note 5 times as I went by. Um, you know, so, but, those aren't interesting experiences when you just describe them. And so just shorten it down to, like, oh yeah, there is one, totally. Like there's a note. It says there are marker switches. Well, I guess those are switches there. How many of them there? 8. Okay, let's go down and put 8 in the thing. Okay, great. And here we get our NPC exposition.
Catherine, my love, I have to leave quickly. Something terrible has happened. It's hard for me to believe. Most of my books have been destroyed. Catherine, it's one of our sons. I suspect Agonor, but I shouldn't leap to conclusions. I'll find him and Cirrus as well. Oh, I should have known better than to have left my library unchecked for so long. Well, I've removed the remaining undamaged books from the library and placed them in their places of protection. You shouldn't have to use the books until I return, but if you've forgotten the access keys, remember the tower rotation. Oh, and don't worry, Catherine. Everything will be fine. I'll see you shortly. Oh, and erase this message after you've viewed it, just to be safe.
So, there's our little bit of exposition. It tells you, some things about what's going on. It tells you, gives you some direction. That's always a big important thing, is that I think that for really good GMing, especially in story or character-based games, that you always want to have things give directions or options. Which is part of why I don't always like just, straight, like here's a puzzle, figure it out. Because puzzles very often just stop things. Like, okay, I gotta figure this out, and I can't go any further until I figure this out. And It's also why I don't like making rules for actions that aren't particularly interesting because failure that doesn't allow failure that doesn't open up any other options or um, doesn't isn't interesting in of its own right stops the game. Well, I want to try to open the door. Roll your dice. Oh, I can't. Oh, well, I try again. I mean that's boring. But another thing I'd like to mention here is that Atris thinks that it's probably Aknar who destroyed the books, and we know it's both of them, and both people who've played. Sorry, spoilers. Um, both of them are involved, but the PC doesn't know that. It is okay. Sorry, the PCs don't know that. NPCs don't know that. It's okay for your NPCs to be wrong. I mean, some players will assume that anything you tell them is true, um, but believable NPCs have their own opinions, um, and have complete information or incomplete information. So it's okay to have NPCs say, well, I think it's this, and it turns out they're completely off base. Sometimes you want to sort of lampshade that um, by like having the obviously clueless character say something, and then you're like, oh well, obviously they're clueless, sort of thing. And sometimes it's just it's part of the mystery that the players have to, the characters have to decide who is who is the characters have to decide who is believable, who is a reliable source. Um, oh, hey J2, nice to see you. Um, so, um, if you have any questions, you know, drop them in there. I don't know what the delay is like, but I will try to get to them. But yeah, the players have to decide who they think is a reliable NPC. This is different than you as a GM. As a GM, you should always be a reliable narrator. You know, you tell them what they see. It is the truth as far as they can tell, and don't pull the rug out from under them unless there's a really good reason and a way that they can figure out that reason. Um, you know, you're not here to fool the PCs. You're here to kind of interpret what they see and provide them the eyes and arms and legs that they don't have in this environment. So, you know, you may, as an NPC, you may be trying to fool them, or you may be, wrong or incomplete. But as the GM who narrates things, you are not only impartial, you're on the player's side. You want them to have fun. Alright, so here we are at the tower rotation. Um, this is one of my favorite bits of Myst for a couple reasons. One, it's sort of like the gateway. If you can't figure out the tower rotation, then you can't get any further. And, you haven't done enough thought and exploration to really appreciate the game. I know I've seen a lot of streamers get stuck here because there's nothing that really, besides that note about the tower rotation from Atris, there's no real details to explain it. And that is problematic. It is that sort of, wall that you hit. But, as a GM, in a game, you can drop more hints. And you're paying attention to the characters. And if, they seem lost, it's like, okay, I need to drop more hints. Or you can simply say, hey, looks like you're stuck. Let's do a discovery roll to give you some questions. And if the players are like, well, my character would be able to figure this out, but I can't. Then you can do skill rolls, or they can spin a fate point, or that sort of thing. Once again, the point is not to frustrate the characters, but to give them challenges that they can overcome, and give them ways to overcome it. And if they just don't have the tools right now, whether it's the right information or such, or they've had a bad day and they're just not thinking very good about the moment, um, or so and so spilled their drink, and and so we spent the last 15 minutes trying to clean that up, and now everybody's unfocused. You do things to meet where your players are, and sometimes that's drop another hint, or you look at the archaeologist and say, you would have thought of X, or you say, well, why don't you roll to see if you can figure it out. Once again, they're all tools that you can work. Okay, so power tower rotation. Surprisingly, how often people in streams miss the red line when it turns red. They'll just be going really quick, and they'll be talking like I'm now. Just oh, and they'll miss it. But so I'm gonna do mechanical first. Okay, and we'll go to this. Interesting thing in Myst VR is that this whole section is very mechanical and steampunky. It's not just like sort of magic painting you touch. There's like levers and stuff that you can actually grab, which is good for VR. But they were definitely going into the hardcore steampunk aesthetic. Up here. Hurry up. Oh, I gotta close the door. See how long it's been since I've actually played this. Excuse me. Adjusting things inside, right? Okay, we're at the tower. Yeah. And here we've got the book symbol. And then we go around to the other side. And we have the key symbol. Once again, depending on the players, I might not I might not wait for them to discover that, oh, wait, I should look on the other side of this, thing. We just say it's circular, it's in the middle, there's symbols on both sides, and, let them go from that. And of course, we get our time 240 and our code 221 for the clock tower. I think this is, the tower rotation puzzles themselves, in terms of, there's a list of clues over here, and, you can find them relatively easily if you know what to do, and then you have to apply them to the environment. This is pretty good for a role-playing game, I think. If nothing else, it gives a good excuse for it to be something explicitly puzzle-like. If your players like puzzles, or you really want a puzzle, puzzles don't just appear in the wild. Even in D&D, the puzzles just don't appear in the wild. So having an explicit reason for there to be puzzles is really useful to, as part of the story. I left clues, that sort of thing. There's a adventure video game based off of the Arthur C. Clarke series Rama, called Rama. This is right. And to get through part of it, you have to understand the number systems of some of the various aliens. kind of like you have to figure out dinning numbering. Um, and in the story, once again, spoilers, it's actually sort of an intelligence test. If you can figure out, you know, number systems based off of clues, then obviously your species is sapient enough, intelligent enough um, to actually be contacted or such. And that's a very good reason for there to be puzzle-like aspects. Similarly, when we get to Exile has an excellent premise for why everything is puzzles. Because they're supposed to be. It's a test. It's a training ground. But but in terms of the tower rotation, figuring out what the tower rotation actually does would be a great puzzle for a game because it's something that there's something you fiddle with and then you can explain. I hear noise, something, and when they go out, you can say, oh look, the tower is different, and they can play with it to different things. Uh, there's an interesting back and forth there, and once again, you can. Yes, I am. Sorry, J2. I just saw that. I am planning to walk through every Myst game. And well, all Myst games, including Uru. Um, and then I will do abduction. Um, my abduction playthrough will probably be really long because I have a lot to say about abduction that may or may not all of it's involving Unwritten, but I have a very long analysis of abduction in my head. So if people are still listening to me at that point, I will probably subject them to it. I wanted to write an essay on it at one point, but who has time? But anyways, the oh well, thank you. Um, so the tower rotation is something that they can do. They can see immediate effects, and you can scale the things as you want. Uh, the keys from the tower rotation um, are relatively simple to implement. Um, and so you can decide if you want to spend a lot of time, doing the various, like, okay, here's your gears. Like, for instance, like this gear puzzle, I wouldn't, something like this, I wouldn't do in a game because it's sort of boring. It's also hard to describe. Um, Now, if you wanted to, draw a picture of something, or even bring in like, physical props that you can kind of do things with, that's fine. I mean, that's in sense of if you know your players and they're wanting to futz with a puzzle, having something that you can actually look at to futz with is actually a great thing to have. Um, there is an old Paranoia game, if people who've heard of Paranoia. Very silly, strange game. Should I do this puzzle earlier? The reaction when he figured it out, the trick was hilarious. That's one of the things I love about watching streams, especially of games that I've already played, because I love seeing people have those aha moments. Some of the moments um, I've seen people have in abduction, for instance, I absolutely love because there's that sort of, that spark of, oh my God, I figured it out. No, I figured it out. And then that reaction, especially to abduction, has some really big reveals and consequences of some of these puzzles. And so there's just this, oh my God, that's so cool. Um, Part of how I designed Unwritten was to try to inspire moments like that. I'm not sure how well I did, and I think if I were to do it again, I probably would fine tune it quite a bit. But there's always fine tuning to be done. Okay, so let's get this puzzle here done. puzzle. It's one of the quickest times I've ever gotten it done. Usually I get rewritten. Yes, yeah. Unwritten might be rewritten. Who knows? No, even unwritten is never written. Um, oh yeah, J2. In terms of abduction, it's pretty good for replay value. Um, and like I said, there's a lot to figure out in the story. Science very good about putting subtle things out there. Sometimes a little too subtle in some parts of abduction, but um, yeah, it's really. But the biggest abduction really um, depends on having a good system. Um, having a system that kind of only barely makes the grade for abduction is a great way to ruin your game. The number system. I actually figured out the number system. I sat down and figured it out like all the way. Um, and because I'm that sort of person, um, I am the sort of person that puzzle was designed for. You know, I'm not saying that like Rand and Rawa were thinking of me when they're like, oh hey, we need to put in a base 4 number system. Um, but I am definitely that sort of person. And for me, that was a great puzzle. The majority of people who play abduction never ever figure out the number system because they don't have to really. But so I mean, we'll do more when we get there about that. Um, but I think that underlines the importance of understanding who your players are and what they like. Here we are into mechanical. But the last session of the Strange Seeds campaign, which we did this last weekend, we spent a lot of time going over the details of that age. I saw this, and this happens, and and the players are still mulling over the details of that age. Um, they're drawing pictures of the animals. They're talking about the ecosystem, that sort of thing. Um, and so we spent a lot of time just like, oh, this is how the animals work, and look, oh, here's the bugs coming through. And I can do that because they're Myst fans who love figuring out little details like that. Your game and your players may not be. And so if it would bore them or frustrate them, just don't do it. Here is our thing here, which I've done this so many times I know the code already, but we'll get back to it. But mechanical, this little station here is very much the sort of place that you might see in a game, in terms of just like a small contained space that's sort of interesting and has history. Whether you actually use the mechanical puzzle of the rotation of the building may or may not be all that important. But this environment is great for a role-playing game because of how much the environment tells you about the character, about the NPCs. There are two rooms. Two rooms for two different, obviously belonging to two different people. There's this one's opulent and has a sense of being refined and has strange things in it, like these here, which everybody's like, okay, what's the puzzle here? It's like there is no puzzle. It's just cool because platonic solids are inherently cool. I'm that sort of person. Once again. But then there's little story beats, like going through here, and like when you're pointing the right way, you can see, the skeleton, whose name I forget. But there's all these little details here to tell you. Um, and then I think there's an extra little detail here, which I think is great, is that there's a hidden room that tells you even more. So we've got all this opulence out there and refinery and that sort of thing. We get back here and it's loot. I mean, there's refined loot, and stuff, but then there's just coins and gold bars and everything. So I mean, that tells you a lot about Cirrus. Here's another great way to get Aknar's voice into things, in the sense of to say something about Cirrus, but also say something about Aknar. So a bit where it's regards. That's like you suck. I hate you. You were a bad person. Regards, Aknar. So I don't know exactly what that says about Aknar, but I'm sure it says something. I'm going to pick up the red page for this part. Okay. Now we're going to go around here. I'm going to take a look at Cirrus's Aknar's room. Yes. You're correct, Junie. The my subjects thing does say a lot about Aknar as well. And then we get to Aknar's room, which is sort of rough and brutal. That's a good word for it. Brutal. So that tells you a lot about Aknar as well. In the Myst VR game, brutish, yeah. In the Myst VR game, there's a lot of these things you can pick them up. Just because, I guess in VR you need to be able to pick things up for it to be interesting. And there's actually a crossbow in here that you can pick up that actually shoots arrows. And the arrows go into the wall. Doesn't do anything, but, what is there to play with? Back here, then, of course, we see the more British stuff, the thing that freaks everybody out. God. They're like, oh, holy, someone's, electrocuting and torturing people back here. So, you learn a little bit more about Aknar again. Just a different sort of Britishness. So these are great character studies. And, don't underestimate the ability of these sort of things to tell your players things without saying them. And sometimes they'll get them right away, and they'll be like, oh, well, that wasn't subtle. And sometimes, subtle things can, hit them later, and that's fine. Once again, gauge your audience. Okie doke. The Fortress Simulator. So this is important. Did the sound go away here? Oh, my sound on my headphones went away. Okay. So, from the game, this is really important because it tells you it gives you an example of what's actually going on. How you would rotate the building, how the switches work, and I think more importantly than anything, what the sounds are. I feel really bad for anybody who's playing Myst the first time and they don't go to mechanical before Selenic or Selenetic, because these sounds are what get you through the Maze Runner. Absolutely no problems if you know these sounds. If you've not heard them before, it's a much bigger leap. This is also a good example of showing people a sort of Chekhov's gun, if you don't know what Chekhov's gun is, it's the idea that you show something, on screen that becomes important later. Don't mention the gun on the mantle unless there's going to be, someone's going to shoot it later on. So this is a great sort of foreshadowing of, here are some things that you need to know. And Myst does a great job. This is a bit of information you need to know in 2 places. Most people don't quite get it at first, I've noticed. I know when I played it, it took me for a while to figure out how it was actually working. But teaching yeah, exactly, Parker. Because it becomes so much easier. And I know everybody hates the Maze Runner. Everybody hates the Maze Runner because it takes so long. And there's a real easy answer to it that people tend to miss. And, I've met people who've been playing, Myst over and over again for years who didn't even realize that was the case. That those sounds meant something. They just have the map of the Maze Runner maze that they made back in the day, and they keep it around. That's always kind of, I hate to see people frustrated, and that is definitely something that frustrates them. I can't, talk in terms of not figuring things out. There are a couple things in in Uru, that I didn't figure out for 3 years after playing the game almost constantly during Until Uru. There were a couple of just little bits here and there. It's like, I didn't know it did that. So, we all have our days where our observation skills are good, and our days where our observation skills are not so good. The fact that there's reasons for a lot of the things that happen in here, like in terms of okay, we need to go down here to unlock it, and what we're doing here is we're lining up not only the symbols, but we're lining up the elevator up above. Physical things that change the environment in logical ways or reasonable ways are really great bits of problem solving for players to involve. Once again, don't leave them stuck. Okie doke. And of course, the controls are up there on top. I think that this is, if you were running this in Unwritten, this is something you'd have to be very careful about. In the sense that, if you're describing, here's an elevator shaft, and we're in this room, and there's some lights and stuff. I mean, you absolutely have to, have some sort of path to them figuring out that, there's something up there. You can either just say, there looks to be there's some sort of controls on top of the elevator, or there's something mechanical, with levers and stuff at the top of the elevator. Once again, as the person describing as their eyes, you need to be able to tell them things that you might want to imply because it's part of the puzzle, but you should just tell them. Just tell them. This particular puzzle, though, where you have to hit the button, the middle button, come out here, and then it comes down, that's a really good puzzle for a role-playing game. Because all the clues are there. It's like, okay, there's that up there. There's 3 buttons on the elevator, and I don't know why. And so what happens when I push the second button? Well, okay, it beeps for a while. You wait, and then it moves down and takes you halfway down. So, once again, you have things people can interact with. They respond in logical ways, and all those interactions tell you something. This actual puzzle here, I don't know if I would do this in a game. It depends on the players if they're really into it. Oh. end up watching me over time quite a bit, you'll find that I do things like that a lot. I'll be like, oh, I'm moving along. I've done this 100 times. My brain is already down to the next step. Oh, I hit that button. Okay. And that's the God, I never know how to explain some of these sounds. It's another thing that, when you're running this for people, when you've got like sound cues like that or other things, make sure that there are easy ways to differentiate. You know, every stream I watch, people when they hear those sounds, like, what is that? Is that a, is that sound a spring or it sounds like a whir? And however you describe it, make sure that you give a way for them to kind of grasp onto the detail, because otherwise they're going to forget it. If those are like, there's three bells, they'll be like, oh, okay. You know, bell 1, bell 2, bell 3, Okay. And over here we get our symbols, of course. Remember if this is the one where we see the skeleton or not. Let's see if this is the side where we see the skeleton. I've played this many times and I still don't remember which is which. I think that's also an important lesson, is that different details will seem important to different people. There's some people who have memorized, this whole thing, and I haven't, because it's just not not something I'm particularly interested in. But other people, it's good. They're going to spend a long time figuring that out and writing it down, and so yeah. I am a big believer that when the players show interest in something, you as a GM, you show interest into it as well, and you start playing to it. I'm not I almost never use actual adventure modules, because I'd rather see what the characters like and just kind of play to what they want. Middle button again. Now, your style may be different. Your mileage may vary. All coupons are redeemable in all locations. Okay. I'm actually trying to go all the way around just to start, because is that right? I forget which. Yeah. So here's an interesting thing. Let's say you do have a puzzle. That's like, hit the wrong button, of course. As I start talking, I'll start hitting the wrong buttons all the time. So here's the thing. You've got to say you have a puzzle like this, where the puzzle is, or the problem at hand is to figure out how to manipulate the environment. How do I get this rotating, building to rotate in the way I want? And there's a lot of different ways you could do that, but once the characters have figured it out, don't make them figure it out again. Like, okay, it's like, okay, I figured out how to turn it to go to, a building to the west, or to east. That'd be east. To get over to that thing to the east. And so they figure it out. Now, don't make them walk, unless they're really interested, don't make them walk through all the steps again to get it to north and then to west. Once they figure out the puzzle, reward them by making it easier to do the other thing. It's like, okay, well, now I want to do the thing for the north. Okay, you do it for the north. You don't even have to roll. You figured it out. You don't have to explain which button you're pushing and that sort of thing. You just move it along. So here, I'm not going to put you guys through, um, going through another side of that. Okie doke. Oh, there it is. Ta-da! And luckily, this age is kind of built that way, in the sense that, okay, I figured out how to get out, and I have one page. And so I can leave now, and I can come back, get the page, and then come right back here to out without having to go through everything. That's one of the weaknesses of the Selenetic Age, is that you have to go through the Maze Runner both times. Don't make your players do repetitive things that are boring. Unless you're trying to make a point of how boring it is. In some situations you can go, like, I just want them to get overwhelmed with how repetitive this is. So you make them do it over and over and over again, and they're gonna, after 2 or 3 times, the player's gonna be sick of it. And then you as a GM can go, oh, my job is done here. And then you can move on. But like anything else, it's a tool. Actually, I am not going to leave quite yet, because I have more to say about mechanical. Not only does mechanical have a lot of things that it tells you about the characters, it's got all these dangling hooks about the world. There are pirates. And, apparently they're nasty pirates because they're willing to put, hang someone's skeleton off of something. And there's, the stories about the pirates in the books in Idris's library. This is all, begging to have an entire chronicle written around it. About, contacting the pirates or defending, innocent ports from pirates or all sorts of things like that. It's not important for Myst. Except in just sort of, like, flavor. And, it's not ever really brought up again. I refuse to acknowledge that those those comic books that are so horrible. So, let me repeat after me. It's never been brought up again. Ever. We don't understand. No one's ever talked about it. Don't talk about the black ships. But I think, once again, it's a small thing that can lead to lots of different ideas. And sometimes your players will go, wow, that's awesome, let's go find the pirates. And sometimes they'll go, I don't know, let's go back and, talk to the guys in the books. No planning you've ever done in a game survives contact with the players. I've totally never heard this 1,000 times before.
Bring me a red. I can't see. I need a red, you must. I can bring.
I'm evil, but help me anyways. Oh, it paused. Sorry, I clicked out by accident and interrupted. Going through all again, I apologize.
Bring me a red. You don't educate it, you must. Bring. I beg of bring. Shh. Help. I am serious. Give it up. Go. There is one thing I need to rescue.
I mean, I get why this message is so long, because they're talking and just big parts of it are being fuzzed out. But I have to admit, sometimes I look at this and I'm like, God, just Sarah, get to the point. This is also, though, a good example of something you might do in a game. If I were to run this in Unwritten, there are two different ways I could do this. I could make this much more interactive, such that there's actually some sort of conversation happening between the two of us. Or I could just do it as in this sort of message format, with lots of with lots of the stuff fuzzed out, so that you get, obviously, they chose the stuff that gets fuzzed out so that you get the basic idea of what's going on, and that you need to do more. Find the red pages. Once again, a direction. And a little bit of kind of sense of who he is and why he's, who he is and maybe why he's there. Doing some, incomplete messages is great. Right. Don't touch it will kill you. No, it's horrible. Just whatever you do, don't touch the. Okay, I'm glad I told you. Goodbye. Yeah. It's a great way to, to kind of, give players, some anxiety. Um, but you could, as I said, you could use this as a conversation back and forth. Technically, age books don't work like that, but they might in your world. Technically, linking books don't work like this, as they do in Myst. But it works for the game. Fuzzing it out during, having incomplete conversations. That's also kind of an interesting character bit, especially if you don't want to give away too much. You're still getting some characterization. You give them some information, but there's a reason. So another problem for them to overcome. I'm gonna go ahead and put the other one here.
You've returned. Thank you for bringing the red page.
I mean, most of us have seen this, so I don't necessarily need to listen to it. But it's got, once again, conversation back and forth. The players do something, they get something back in terms of more information.
Fine. The remaining red pages. You must read.
The MacGuffin hunt is a classic thing of any game, really. Whether it be red blue pages and blue pages, or the rod of 7 parts or whatever.
I need more red pages, please. Don't waste time. Look.
Don't waste time. That implies a time pressure. Now this game has no time pressure, but
My brother.
and maybe the characters don't have an actual time pressure as well. But that's an interesting way to apply time pressure.
I wrongfully imprisoned.
Once again, your NPC doesn't have to be correct.
Bring the red page to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Robin Miller. Okie doke. Let's see here. So I'm gonna go get the blue page real quick. While I'm doing that, anybody from the chat have questions or comments on anything so far? Or anything in general, hopefully Myst related. be careful if you ask me something about something not Myst related that I know a lot about. You may never shut me up. Admit this is a great effect here with the, actually give you a flashlight for once. Um, things that you wanted all along, Maybe you would have had a flashlight in Uru instead of fireflies. Who knows? Nope, I went through the wrong way. You wanted to see the scenic ride anyways, right? Check something. I think I lost a couple people in chat. Of course, like I said, most of you are fans, so you've seen all of this before. And once again, you kind of see, sometimes the running back and forth is pretty boring. So, don't do it too much in your games. Board players are not fun for you or them.
Monsieur? Are you? See you. Help me. Bring me blue pages.
Now we've said the constant.
Never, never. Pages. I must have the blue page. Bring them to me.
Okie doke. Page 1. Put the other page in there too.
You've returned. You wouldn't return. The pages rescue me. I'm Akinah. My brother, I beg you.
Close that. Okay. Okie doke. So that's mechanical. And you notice that, we haven't even really, looked at, most of the lore here and so with that. Lore dumps are very problematic in role-playing games. Just like, having, someone do exposition in the middle of a movie. Like, let's spend 20 minutes describing why everything is the way it is. That's not always very fun. You have to be sort of careful about it. Sometimes, you work it in. Sometimes you leave documents around. And sometimes you write, you can write stuff down and give it to players between games. Here's some stuff. Here's what I wrote about it, or that sort of thing. The bit with the changing colors is kind of cool too. That sort of is a bit of a Chekhov's gun right there too, in the sense that, if I were to say like, oh look, the colors change, I would probably have something in the plot later on about, why that in a way that's for some reason that's important. I mean, it can be it's a cool, you can have just cool details, but it's that sort of thing. Do. Oh, let's see here. I mean, I like the fact that, we have the day and night cycles here in Real Myst. And I understand it's kind of a, you know, new technology and such, but the night times do make it really difficult to see all the details. So, I don't know. Let's see, do I have this on? Let's see here. There we go. Thank God for flashlights. Do-do-do. Oh, Junie has questions. Thank you. Do I like doing this? I really enjoy hearing you talk through the difference between playing a video game versus your thinking as an RPG. I do enjoy doing this. It's sort of a guilty pleasure in a way. I was one of those, kids who like to talk about, everything that they learned at school that day, and people are like, "Shut up." You know, no one wants to hear about geometry again. So I do kind of enjoy having the chance to go on at length about stuff. Um, like I said, there are certain topics, if you get me on them, I will not stop talking for long periods of time. Myst happens to be one of them, as my friends and um, loved ones know very, very, very well by now. But yeah, I also like thinking about, you know, obviously having, in terms of writing an RPG, you know, you have to think about, what do people do in role-playing games. Um, for Unwritten, I had to spend a lot of time thinking about what I wanted people to do in Unwritten. I mean, because, not only because of you know, frame the game, but also in terms of the actual rules. Um, I'm a big fan of the system matters philosophy in role-playing games. Um, those of you who don't know, maybe for those who haven't been around in the RPG community for a while, there used to be a website called The Forge back in the late 2000s, not late 1000s, late 2000s. And there was a lot of talk about RPG theory and what are people actually doing in RPGs, how do games actually apply some of those ideas. And I'm a big fan of a lot of that. It was all sort of very eye-opening to me to read. Um, and I think that how you put the game together um, I mean, you can play any background in any game, honestly. You know, if you want to play, a Denise thing in D&D using a D&D system, you can do that. Um, but D&D has a focus and some things it does really well. Um, the sort of feel that I was trying to capture for Unwritten is not what D&D does well. Famously, Kenneth Haidt said, "What D&D does really well is it strings together a different fight. It strings together fights with a sense, so you have a sense of continuity. So D&D is very good at combat, and killing things and taking their stuff, and having a sense of continuity between doing that. Um, nothing inherently wrong with that. Um, but it's what's good at. So Unwritten was kind of designed to help with the sort of game that I wanted to see, which was I was trying to um, give a role playing experience that was like what I loved about Myst games. Um, and it took me a while to get there. Um, my first draft of Unwritten was a very basic role playing game, even though it was based off of Fate. It was still very basic. I mean, it had combat. It had combat, and I actually had some scenes in examples of people deciding it was time to pull out a gun and go after the Barrow, at like Sharper did. Because I thought like okay, some games you know there is conflict and that might be you can have action and that sort of thing. Um, I showed the first draft of Unwritten to Lenny Balsera, who was the person who who was the main developer for Fate, especially in the Dresden Files era and the Fate Core era, who is also a really huge Myst fan. Um, Myst fans are everywhere. You may feel like, a lot of Myst fans feel like they're isolated, and then but, there are Myst fans everywhere. Um, anyways, so he looked at it and said, hey, this is a perfectly fine role playing game, but it doesn't say anything special about the Myst games. Why not go all in on those things that you think the Myst games exemplify? And one of them was the fact is that there just isn't any combat in the game. You figure things out by, I mean, you solve problems not by killing the people in front of you, or hitting them and taking their stuff. You solve problems by using your brain and getting around things and understanding. And so the idea was then, it's like, okay, if it's not a game about combat, why have combat at all? Why focus on it? Why put a whole system about, hit points and attacks of opportunity and attack and defense when what you're going to be what you want the player to spend their time on are looking at things and figuring out what's going on and exploring new vistas. So that is what Unwritten was supposed to be. And I developed a very, very strong opinion about role-playing games in general and Unwritten and how Unwritten was supposed to go as a part of realizing that I was shaping the game. I was shaping what people are going to play the game to be and what Unwritten was going to be. Um, so I now have very strong opinions about role-playing games. Um, in general. Um, and Unwritten in particular. And I decided that in Unwritten I was just going to state those opinions. This is not about combat. You know, in a way, Junie, it says you wrote a world, but I think in a way, I think every GM does. It's another reason why I think that the Myst, the Myst franchise is underrated by the role playing world because what they're doing in pretty much what the writers do in Myst is what every GM does every time. Is they're creating a world. They're putting out the details. The players run into it and react to it. Um, you know, you know, every GM is a writer and is a member of the Guild of Writers. It's just how it is, I think. Um, and so hopefully I was able to write something that helps people do that. Um, and once again, this is very particularly my interpretation of the Myst universe. and my interpretation of role playing. But you know, um, Myst fans are often very hung up on canon. What happened? What actually happened? What did Rawa say that happened? But the Myst games show you that there's all these different versions. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with trap books. It's not canon. It's a it was something to kind of just to make the game work, to make some stakes. But there's nothing wrong with it. Your game might have Myst books. Run with that. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours. Um, I'm generally thinking that in general, I probably will run these for about 3 hours. Um, but this week, since I've been trying to work on some other things and I had the other game just last week, I'm a little worn out. So I think I'm going to keep this week down to 2 hours with the idea that, in the future, to quote Rand Miller, that these will be 3 hours, with one ingredient in between, a little break in the middle. So we've done one whole age, um, in 2 hours. And we did quickly because we all know the answers already. Um, and it went slowly because I talk a lot. But yeah, so that's what I'm planning so far. If that doesn't work out, um, if that doesn't work out, for whatever reasons, people just feel like 2 hours is better, or maybe longer is better, we'll adjust from there. Um, this is a lot more of a collaborative effort between me and the people who are watching than say the Strange Seeds campaign is. That's a bit more exhibition than than this. Um, so yeah. So those of you who are on the Cyan Discord, um, or on the Unwritten Discord, please leave your comments there, suggestions. Um, you know, Next week we'll do another age, maybe two, and we can decide then which maybe I'll put up a poll about which age we do next. Um, or if there are other directions that people want to go, I'm happy to do that as well. I can pretty much talk about anything in whatever direction you want to. So um, this is be partially a community experiment. Thanks for coming by. Um, and next week, eating and taking notes. Well, I appreciate that you think that I said something interesting enough to take notes on. Um, that's high praise, honestly. All right. I will see. I will be here next week. This is going to be a weekly thing, and we're going to try to turn this channel into a proper Twitch channel with VIPs and the whole 9 yards. Um, and we'll talk more then. Sharabashimte.